Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs from Future Tech Podcast, Around the Corner, Almost Here Technology. And today I'm talking with Digital Catapult, the company, Sam Davies. Sam, how you doing? Can you hear me okay?
I can indeed. Hello, how's it going?
Yeah. I know you're over in the UK, so it's getting into the evening, so thank you for doing this.
No worries.
Yeah, Sam, would you mind giving listeners a brief overview of what Digital Catapult does?
Sure. So the Digital Catapult, we are an applied research and innovation centre, primarily based in London in the UK, but with regional centres throughout the rest of the UK. So at the Digital Catapult, we're part of what's called the Catapult Network. So this has been set up, in part funded by the UK government, to try and speed up innovation and technical adoption in a number of key areas. So, for example, there's a catapult looking at high-value manufacturing, so looking at new manufacturing techniques. There's a catapult looking at renewable energy, another one looking at future cities planning, transport systems, cell therapy. And at the Digital Catapult, we primarily focus more on computer science-related problems and computer science-related technologies. So we are... Sorry?
Okay, I was just clearing my throat. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, sure. So we are completely not-for-profit. We're completely neutral, and our only sort of main goal is to try and boost the adoption of technologies for UK SMEs and industry to try and give them a real boost within key areas. So we primarily focus on 4 key technology areas, which are AI and machine learning, immersive, so VR and AR, IoT, so sort of the whole world of Internet of Things, and also the networks which they run on, so 5G networks, next generation cell phone networks, and also looking at low power wide area networks. And then sort of the technical area I work, which is it's called data driven, but we're looking at blockchain, smart contracts, security, personal data. So how technologies within those areas can be used. And then on top of that, we've got 3 key industrial areas which we focus on. So we're looking at digital health and well-being, digital manufacturing, and then the area which I primarily sit in, creative industries as well.
Well, you guys are involved in a lot. Is the word catapult common over in the UK? Here, you have incubators, you have startups, you have angel investing, etc. So is catapult a word that you guys coined, or is it a typical word or used over there?
It's slightly differentiates though. So we're not really an incubator. We're not angel investing. We don't invest at all. It's to try and sort of distinguish us that we are there. Sort of the idea being we try and catapult companies, catapult technology, and just give it that sort of little push which is sometimes needed. We work really closely with lots of SMEs, with startups, with academia, with other research centres, both in the UK and across Europe, to try and sort of speed up the adoption of this technology.
Okay. Yeah, so let's go over a couple of your favorites that you worked on, and whatever reason why is why. But tell me about the ones that you thought were most interesting, most exciting, and what your involvement was in them.
Sure. So one of the projects which I'm primarily involved in is using blockchain and smart contracts. So this is, I think, this whole area is an absolutely fascinating technology. I think it's massively hyped. It's got lots of people jumping on various bandwagons. But I do personally honestly believe it has the potential to be phenomenally disruptive. If you look at all of the research, if you look at everything that's going in the fintech sector, the money, the resources, the research that's going on over there, it's phenomenal, and it's really clear that those guys have identified this as something that they need to get to grips with. At the Catapult, we've looked at that. we've realized there's a huge amount of resources being plowed into fintech. So we're looking at how we can use blockchain and smart contracts in other industries. One of the main areas that we're looking is around IP assembly and IP protection within the creative industries. So we've teamed up with an organisation called the UK Games Fund to create a prototype which allows game developers, teams or companies, to create a computer game or other project along those lines, but then to track all IP within the game through smart contracts, to run the company, to run the governance structure, the shares, the voting, any equity, to have all of that handled via smart contracts. So the UK Games Fund are a community interest company, so again another not-for-profit, who are really trying to help low-level game development within the UK. They run a project called Transfuser, which is for graduate development teams to basically build a computer game, work together, with the aim to try and actually sell this, and there's prizes for successful developments. And so we've got a prototype that we built with those guys where we've got about 20 teams who are using our system. And so alongside them actually programming and making the game, all the artwork, the music, the audio, everything that goes around a professional game development project, they're actually running their companies and they're running they're tracking the IP of that using our smart contract system. This is a huge amount of fun. It's a cracking project to not only see how the technical side of things work, but also to see how this actually works from their point of view. You know, are these game developers just, you know, is it useful for them? Is it something that will actually be of benefit? And what we found is that it's really useful because it allows them to have sort of the same kind of governance and legal protection that they would have if they set up, say, a standard company limited by guarantee. But without that investment, you know, you don't have to get the legal advice. You don't actually have to go down to Companies House in the UK to set something up. You can just do it from a few clicks of the button of a mouse. So we've had that running since just before Christmas, and we're now looking to massively extend that project with an end goal to try and make it open source so that anyone who's looking to do some kind of creative collaboration with a group of other people, they can use this just to preliminary track and mark any equity, any IP, or any shares within the company which they're creating.
Interesting. Okay. Any other projects that you think were really interesting? Maybe ones where your role was unexpected or had a huge impact.
Well, another project which we've just started up, which I think's got fantastic potential, is it's an EU-funded research project called Synchronicity. The goal of the project is to look at IoT marketplaces. So how different cities, so there are 7 cities within Europe who are part of this project, and it's looking at how they can just create an ecosystem to allow different organizations to share, buy, sell, and use IoT data for services within those cities. And the role that we've got in that is to see how we can use blockchain for that. So a while back we had a huge amount of fun creating basically just a prototype to see how well we could use the Ethereum blockchain on Raspberry Pis for IoT. And we just had a pretty small scale prototype set up where we had a bunch of IoT sensors, we had a bunch of slightly larger servers and a bunch of different clients. And the IoT sensors, they had some really basic intelligence in them. And so every so often, when these sensors decided that they had a bit of information, some data which was interesting, they would work out the value of that and how interesting it was, package it up, and then set up an auction, which other devices could then bid for and try and win access for. And all of this was handled using Ethereum-based smart contracts. So that was a real interesting starting point for us in the Synchronicity project. So we're now looking to see how we can extend that. Because, I mean, the prototype that we were building, it was small scale, it was running in the office just to see, what's it like getting Ethereum running on a Raspberry Pi? What sort of protocols do you need? How can you handle the data purchasing and all of that kind of stuff, just to see if it worked. So we're now looking to push that out for a far, far larger scale to actually get it running in actual cities.
What's funny is I've heard a lot about Ethereum and smart contracts and everything, but I haven't heard people actually programming them and running them and having them work or not work and testing them out in the wild. So you're saying you got to that point with Ethereum, and what if so, what did you guys notice? What was the good and the bad of it?
Yes. I mean, that's one of the things that's sort of very keen on is that, as you're saying, a lot of people are sort of talking about it, and there's a huge amount of interest in this. But we're very interested just to actually crack on and see what we can build, see what we can get running, see what the pros are, see what the cons are. Because Ethereum's great. It's got some fantastic. I mean, the programming language for smart contracts is great. It's really comprehensive. You can do some really clever things with it. But then there are some slight issues around it. I mean, there was the DAO, not hack, but the DAO. The issue with the DAO, where a huge amount of equity was taken out of it by unexpected usage of the code. So that, I think, is absolutely fascinating. That's the whole thing about the code is law. So one of the projects that we've written, so for example, with the UK Games Fund, if these are theoretical, huge, large-scale companies which are running on these things, whatever's written in the code, that's actually tracking the equity. People were working on these projects in return for shares within the game. Those shares were tracked using these smart projects. If somebody could get in and change those, if we'd incorrectly coded it, if we'd done anything like that, obviously, this isn't just sort of like a small-scale coding error where you can patch it up. Once these things are out and running, there's not a huge amount that you can actually do about it.
Right.
So it's really interesting, trying to work through the almost the testing, making sure that it was correct, not just in that we've got all the variable assignments correct and all of our functions perform, but actually sort of the semantics of the functions themselves, what we intended to do, actually happened. So we spent a huge amount of time working with VCs and lawyers to look at how we can actually translate what's in a sort of a standard paper contract into code. And I think that's sort of one of the key issues which we've really got to crack on with when we're looking at anything for sort of smart contracts or chain code if you're using Hyperledger or what have you. It's this translation from the traditional business models which are using to smart contracts. Because if you look at how we've traditionally handled this, it's for effectively the legal industry. A huge number of fearsomely intelligent people are writing, are analysing, are arguing, are debating what these standard contracts mean. We're now potentially, with smart contracts, you can look to remove those people from some instances. So we need to make sure that the code performs exactly as it should, that there's no ambiguity, that there isn't any room for sort of disagreement. But then also, one of the key interesting things we found out is that there's always going to be disagreement within these things. You need some kind of arbitration.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
People will always...
There's got to be a way for people to get involved, and if a contract doesn't go the way people want it to go, or a set of code, there's got to be an intervention,
Well, that's the thing, when you have people working together, there are always going to be instances, or there are always going to be problems arising which you just don't foresee. You can't put a bunch of if statements or for statements or any kind of fuzzy logic in to handle. So I remember when we were doing the UK Games Fund work, we initially started this was going to be completely decentralized. There was going to be no involvement in any sort of human entity. These were things that were going to run as decentralized, distributed smart contracts, and the company would be the code. As we started building the system, we didn't realize that actually wasn't really going to happen. So we then had to work out how we could get an arbitrator system, sort of a dispute resolution service built into these systems. And we were able to do that because Ethereum is really nice. It's got some sort of object-oriented properties, so you're allowed to have sort of inheritance. So from that, we had the UK Games Fund was created as a smart contract entity, which had overall control over anything that happened within these companies, if needed be. And then as the participants signed up to use this agreement, so to use this system, they agreed that in the case of any disputes, they were happy for the UK Games Fund to be able to sort of freeze accounts, to put any equity into escrow accounts, to come in and reverse share transactions or anything like that, and that they would abide by the rules of the UK Games Fund, which that again opens up a really interesting area of discussion for future larger collaborations or larger usage of these, is that you need these independent arbitrators. So that's sort of a really interesting sort of new business model that could be taken. And who would these arbitrators be? Could it be the judicial system? Could it be almost accounting companies like KPMG or Ernst & Young, who actually fulfill this role at the moment? They'll come in as independent auditors and inspect something. Could these guys now be the independent dispute resolution services or the independent arbitrators within a smart contract. There's a really interesting area sort of the business process and the technical side of things to have a look at.
I guess in the future you'd have a position that's specialized in evaluating and arbitrating smart contracts. It'll probably evolve into its own type of specialty, you know?
Well, I think there's a couple of specialties, like saying that one being the arbitration service, being a sort of a trusted, independent authority within them. But then there'll also be services in validating smart contracts, ensuring that they do what they're meant to do, not from a technical point of view, but from sort of a business logic point of view, from a governance standpoint as well.
Yeah, and I guess there probably could be an insurance-based component, you know, if a smart contract has unintended consequences, you could be insured against the bad effects, et cetera. But I see it probably as a whole ecosystem that'll spring up around it. There'll be, you know, solicitors or lawyers that'll be trained specifically to work with them, arbitrators, insurance, all that stuff. You know?
Completely, exactly. You know, quite often you'll hear people talking that these things could put, you know, completely revolutionise insurance, put people out of work, what have you. I don't think at all, exactly as you're saying, will just require people to slightly retrain, you know, to start working on these things in a slightly different area, to be, you know, legal specialties within smart contracts. As you're saying, for any kind of insurance or reinsurance of smart contracts, that will be a really interesting industry to see how that springs up.
Okay. Maybe one more example of a project you're working on that maybe a different kind of example, one that maybe didn't work, but you thought opened up your mind to something you never knew, you know, something strange and unusual. So I mean, I've only been at the Catapult now for a year, and these are two projects which I've primarily worked on, which have been really, really interesting. We have recently finished a collaborative project around copyright in the OPP, which was an absolutely fantastic project where we built a really, really interesting distributed platform to allow people to try and identify the copyright of an image online, so that the idea of that being sort of try out the marketplace. And that's been a great project, sort of some really good code's been developed, and we've worked in conjunction with the Copyright Hub Foundation. And they've now taken that project on. So that's really, really good from sort of our point of view, that we have been able to sort of the work of industry. We've built this great code base, which is now being taken forward by the Copyright Hub Foundation themselves and developed that way. Okay. All right. So in general, when an organization wants to work with you, what are some of the parameters? You know, cost, number of hours of involvement. You know, do you take a stake in the company? You know, those kinds of things.
It really varies on how we work with people. So we primarily are there to help UK SMEs. And so we do that sort of in various different ways. So we've got some kind of digital challenges which we help people out with. We run various events for them as well. So we have we do sort of corporate R&D and commercial ventures where we team up with a large scale corporation who may have some R&D or some research challenges, and then we will run events with them and with a bunch of carefully selected UK SMEs, so that we can try and create sort of some really interesting research partnerships between those two. We have a fantastic central London location just in King's Cross, where we have a huge number of people coming through day in, day out for various events, you know, from C-level ministers, innovation officers from various companies. And so we have digital showcases within there. So, you know, again, we'll sort of pick some really interesting companies who can showcase and demo the work which they're doing, which is really good way of sort of increasing their exposure. And then also we do a lot of collaborative research projects. So in the UK we can get EU funding for collaborative research projects, or we can apply to the UK government themselves for funding for research. And so we will work with, you know, one or more SMEs or academic partners to try and help them solve a problem which is pertinent and relevant to their business, but will also be able to be used in the wider world. So that as a Digital Catapult, we will take on some research challenges, and then we will completely open source all of the results which we find out, so that anybody who's interested, anybody who has that problem, can use that.
So essentially, you help UK companies get access to funding and resources and talent and grants and all these things that they otherwise couldn't. So you're an assist to companies that you find of value to move their projects forward.
Yes, yeah, and also we have core funding ourselves to take on research projects which could be too large or too complex for one small company to take on themselves. So we can do the research in that, and we can try and bring people together in order to push that research to help it coalesce, bringing academic and industry partners together to really sort of make something useful happen.
Any sister organizations or similar ones in other countries that you know of that you work with?
Yeah, so there's the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany do of a far bigger scale than we are. Those guys do cracking stuff, like MP3. They're brilliant. And then there's iMinds in Belgium as well, who again we've all got this sort of set up by governments but not controlled by the governments to help research in various industries.
Mm-hmm. How do you decide what projects that you'll take on and which ones you think would not be of interest? Like, how do you steer what you're going to get involved in? Who decides that?
Well, we've just had a big strategy refresh within the Catapult, which has been really, really interesting, and it's sort of helped define what technologies that we want to work in and also what industries. So we've got those those key areas which we want to work on, which we've got the in-house expertise, because we've got a really a cracking engineering research team, we've got fantastic marketing, we've got the whole back office staff that you need for these things. So what we need to do is to make sure that primarily that in the Catapult itself we've got the resources to help out that will be useful for, and also that the project being proposed fits within one of our sort of industry areas and technology layers as well, and that the end result will actually really benefit not just one or two companies, but a whole industry itself. So, for example, with the smart contract work we're doing with the UK Games Fund, we're working with the UK Games Fund to do a prototype with that one company, but all of the technology that we're developing, everything that we're learning, can really help a lot of other companies who are working, with this idea set in music or in other creative industries. So we then go and chat to those guys, tell them what we've done, see if there's anything from what we've already built that would be useful for them, and then try and just help the industry as a whole rather than just a few specific companies.
I would guess that once companies hear about you, everyone would want to get your help. Do you ever suffer from too many companies asking for help, or ones that you think are just trying to get them assistance when it's not warranted?
Yeah, I mean, there are some instances where what a company wants to do, if it doesn't particularly fall within our remit, but that's why having the Catapult network is really fantastic, because if somebody comes to us with a predominantly energy-related challenge or an energy-related project they want to work on, that's not something that falls within anything we do, but there is an energy systems Catapult, so we would make an introduction to those guys.
Okay.
But I think because there are so many different Catapults working, that it's quite good to pass people on that way.
And how do companies present? Do you have formalized events throughout the year where it's like a showcase of a whole bunch of companies, or do they just drip in, as they come?
We've got various different ways of working. So we have loads of things. We have open calls where we publish on our website sort of challenges or technologies that we are interested in and invite companies to apply. As I was saying, we do pit stops where we team up with large organisations with a research challenge, and then again we'll help them define what they want to achieve, and then we'll put open calls out for companies to come and work with us, or we've built up a huge network of companies that we know, so just going out networking and meeting people, or people who know people, etc., etc. And so we'll be able to approach companies that we've met and see if they want to get stuck in. We put lots of different events on, so meetups, coffee mornings, huge range of different events where people can just come in and see what we're doing in the Catapult, chat to sort of the researchers, chat to technologists, and see if there's any potentials for collaboration. And then we've got projects like the UK Games Fund project that we're working. For the next generation of that, we're now actively seeking other organisations who are working within the similar industry in the UK to come and help us out with that. So there's a huge amount that people can do. And we also do a load of work with the academics as well. So we have sort of researchers in residence, so we're able to disseminate funding from the UK government to get people to come and work in the centre for 6 months on a research project, which they may not necessarily be able to do in their traditional academic post, because it's slightly tangential to what they're doing. So that's sort of a brilliant. We've got some fantastic people working for us at the moment, and we've had some cracking ones in the past, looking at really interesting topics. And so, there's just loads of different ways to get stuck in.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, actually, is the universities and the schools, do you have interaction with them? But you just answered that. So that's great.
Cool.
Any expansion plans for this year, or other areas that you're going to be going into?
Well, so immersive and virtual reality is a really, really new area for us. So we're rapidly building on what we can do in that area. We've got some great staff now who are looking at it from a research point of view. And there's some really, really interesting some ideas which we have. So obviously with sort of virtual reality, it's not just restricted to the work we do. Quite a few of the other catapults have got some cracking work that they're doing around VR and AR. So it's looking sort of how can we have a really good partnership between them. And that is an area that it's new. We're still forming what we want to do in that area, but it's going to be really exciting.
Okay, well, very good. Any other areas or questions you think we should cover that I left out? I try to be broad and capture a lot of what you guys are doing.
Just reading through the briefing notes. No, I mean, I think if you're happy with what you've got, that sounds pretty good from us, I'd say.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing is phenomenal, and I didn't even know that organizations like yours exist, and that's, I think it's a great thing you guys are doing.
Yeah, it's slightly behind the scenes, just because we don't do a lot of consumer work. It's more sort of helping businesses.
Yeah, so, I mean, you reach out to the community quite a bit, but just in case, for listeners, how can they, talk to you about proposals? How can they get involved? Start a dialogue, find out more about what you guys do.
Cool. Jump onto our website, and that's got details of all the projects which we're currently doing, more information on the events which we're running, and then a whole bunch of ways to get in touch with any questions that you have, and they will get filtered through to the right people in the organisation who will get back to you.
Yeah, and just for listeners, again, so it's Sam Davies of Digital Catapult. Website is digitalcatapult.org.uk, so everyone has it.
Digitalcatapultcentre.org.uk.
Oop, center or centers?
Centre.
Okay, well, that's why I clarify. Okay. Digitalcatapultcenter.org.uk. Very good. Okay. All right, Sam. Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. It was good.
Cool. Brilliant. Cool. Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Jack. Very interesting.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
And then we'll put open calls out for companies to come and work with us, or we've built up a huge network of companies that we know, so just going out networking, meeting people, or people who know people, etc., etc. And so we'll be able to approach companies that we've met and see if they want to get stuck in. We put lots of different events on, so meetups, coffee mornings, huge range of different events where people can just come in and see what we're doing in the Catapult, chat to sort of the researchers, chat to technologists, and see if there's any potentials for collaboration. And then we've got projects like, the UK Games Fund project that we're working, for the next generation of that. We're now actively seeking other organisations who are working within the similar industry in the UK to come and help us out with that. So there's a huge amount that people can do. And we also do a load of work with the academics as well. So we have sort of researchers in residence, so we're able to disseminate funding from the UK government to get people to come and work in the centre for 6 months on a research project, which they may not necessarily be able to do in their traditional academic post because it's slightly tangential to what they're doing. So that's sort of a brilliant. We've got some fantastic people working for us at the moment, and we've had some cracking ones in the past looking at really interesting topics. And so, there's just loads of different ways to get stuck in.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, actually, is the universities and the schools, do you have interaction with them? But you just answered that. So that's great.
Cool.
Any expansion plans for this year or other areas that you're going to be going into?
Well, so immersive and virtual reality is a really, really new area for us. So we're rapidly building on what we can do in that area. We've got some great staff now who are looking at it from a research point of view. And there's some really, really interesting some ideas which we have. So obviously with sort of virtual reality, it's not just restricted to the work we do. Quite a few of the other catapults have got some cracking work that they're doing around VR and AR. So it's looking sort of how can we have a really good partnership between them. And that is an area that it's new. We're still forming what we want to do in that area, but it's going to be really exciting.
Okay, well, very good. Any other areas or questions you think we should cover that I left out? I try to be broad and capture a lot of what you guys are doing.
So I was reading through the briefing notes. No, I mean, I think if you're happy with what you've got, that sounds pretty good from us, I'd say.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing is phenomenal, and I didn't even know that organizations like yours exist, and that's I think it's a great thing you guys are doing.
Yeah, it's slightly behind the scenes, just because we don't do a lot of consumer work. It's more sort of helping businesses.
Yeah, so, I mean, you reach out to the community quite a bit, but just in case, for listeners, how can they, talk to you about proposals? How can they get involved? Start a dialogue, find out more about what you guys do.
Cool. Jump onto our website, and that's got details of all the projects which we're currently doing, more information on the events which we're running, and then a whole bunch of ways to get in touch with any questions that you have, and they will get filtered through to the right people in the organisation who will get back to you.
Yeah, and just for listeners, again, so it's Sam Davies of Digital Catapult. Website is digitalcatapult.org.uk, so everyone has it.
Digitalcatapultcentre.org.uk.
Oop, center or centers?
Centre.
Okay, well, that's why I clarify. Okay. Digitalcatapultcenter.org.uk. Very good. Okay. All right, Sam. Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. It was good.
Cool. Brilliant. Cool. Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Jack. Very interesting.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner of Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
Oh, that's why I clarify. Okay. Digitalcatapultcenter.org.uk. Very good. Okay. All right, Sam. Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. It was good.
Cool. Brilliant. Cool. Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Jack. Very interesting.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner of Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more. 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.